Well, good evening. It is very dark. Let me turn those red lights off so they don't blind you. There we go. It is very dark. It is about 8 o'clock at night, and I'm out here shooting the Milky Way. It's that time of year again where the Milky Way is visible from the east coast of Australia from about May through to about July. And the earlier months, you can actually get it a bit earlier in the evening. And so, having checked on the Clear Outside app, I've noticed that it was going to be a really clear night tonight, so I thought I'd come out and I'd have another go at shooting the Milky Way tonight. And because every time I do this, I get so many questions on, what settings do I use, what sort of lens, what sort of, how do you focus on the stars? I thought I'll answer some of those questions as well. So I'll do my best considering how dark it is. I've just got this light obviously on the camera, but I've got my camera just here and I can sort of at least show you a little bit of what I'm doing. And then maybe what we'll do is I'll fill in the gaps when we get back to home, and I'll take you through exactly what you need to think about when it comes to shooting the Milky Way. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things you need to think about with astrophotography. We are going to go back out in the field shortly, where I'll talk you through things and show you exactly how I go about setting my composition in the dark, setting my focus, and a few other tips and tricks that really help nail the shot when it comes to getting really good, sharp astrophotography shots, because I know a lot of people struggle with it. I thought what would be helpful right now is for me to go through the 3 key areas you need to think about when you're setting yourself up to go out for an astro shoot, because one of the questions I get a lot is, what settings did you use? Well, settings is important, but there are 2 other major considerations when it comes to astrophotography. So I've got a bit of a list that I'm going to go through, and so it might be a good idea for you to grab a pen and paper, pause the video, because you'll need these as a bit of a checklist to help you when you go out and you do your shoot. All right, let's kick off talking about equipment. Well, needless to say, you're going to need a camera, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, isn't it? But you want one where you can manually adjust things. So for example, this one allows me to do longer exposures because I can manually adjust the shutter speed and the aperture, etc. So your camera does need to have manual adjustments to be able to optimize your opportunity of shooting astrophotography. The other thing you're going to need is a nice ultra wide angle lens. Typically I like to shoot at 14 millimeters or 16, probably 20 mil maximum. So this is the 14 to 24 f2.8. Another great lens, if you can get one, would be something with a 1.8 or a 1.4 aperture. But once again, you want to try and stay nice and wide. So this one here, like I said, I shoot at 14 millimeters. It gets a lot of the Milky Way in when you're shooting it. So nice fast glass is really important. Tripod, goes without saying, you're going to need a nice sturdy shooting platform. This is the Really Right Stuff TVC 33. This is super sturdy, so you want something that's a nice solid platform that you know is not going to move around, even if there's a bit of wind around or something, which there was last night when I was shooting. But in the wind, I just lower it down. I only put 2 sections out on the legs, and I keep it nice and low to the ground, which is a bit more uncomfortable with using the camera. But I'd rather reduce all risks whatsoever of camera shake. Now, having said that, I also use a remote release, so I've got the wireless remote for this one. And I prefer wireless rather than having the wire coming out of the camera, because once again, you don't have to touch it, and it means that you're not going to introduce any camera shake. A little bit of other equipment that's really nice to have is a headlamp. So this is the Nikon headlamp. The reason I like this, a couple of reasons really. It's rechargeable, but the main reason it has these red lights. So rather than a white light, the red light doesn't affect there's some stuff going on in your eyeballs that when you use white light, it takes a while for it to adjust, but the red light doesn't. And that's why you see a lot of pilots, they use red when they're doing stuff in the cockpit, or even in a dark room, you see they use red lights because it doesn't have the same effect as a white light. So I really like this one here. And then the final bit of equipment, which is not necessary but is real nice to have, is something like this Hoodman loop. So this Hoodman loop, it allows me to look at the screen in a bit more detail and make sure that I have actually got my focus, because it's nothing worse than getting home, putting your images into Lightroom or wherever you're putting them, and realizing that you haven't got focus. All right, now we've got equipment out of the way, let's talk about conditions, because the Milky Way is not there all year round. It's only there for certain months of the year. And here on the east coast of Australia, I think it's from about February you can start to see the Milky Way after sunset. I like waiting till around about mid-May or beginning of May, because the Milky Way, it's like the sun or the moon, it rises and it sets. And so the galactic core of the Milky Way is sort of in a good position in May, where I am. You need to do your own research using something like Google for your local area. You'll find some answers definitely, or some local photographers that have been out shooting the Milky Way. Now, there is a couple of apps that can really help you do this. The one that I use for my astrophotography planning is Photopills. And Photopills is an app that you get on your phone, and it allows you to use night AR to do a bit of planning, and you can sort of hold your phone up. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that because it's got, unfortunately other stuff in there, but that is actually the, it's showing me over there the Milky Way behind me there, which of course it's daylight right now. So it's no good at this point in time, but it works really well. The other thing you need when it comes to conditions is you want to get as close to the new moon as you can, which can be difficult because sometimes the night where there's zero moon, or the new moon, it might be cloudy, right? So it goes without saying that you need a nice clear night as well with no clouds in the sky. I've tried shooting it sometimes. I've seen some shots where there is cloud in the sky and it just does not look anywhere near as good because the clouds won't have any definition. They just basically look like haze over the top of the stars. So you really do want a nice clear night. There's another app called Clear Outside that I use, and it predicts for your location the likelihood of cloud in the sky. It's a fantastic app. If I show you just quickly, there's this one here, you can see it's got cloud and stuff on it, but this is what you'll see when you use that app. But you can sort of do a bit of prediction. It lets you forecast. It also tells you when the moon is going to be a new moon, but you can sort of do it when it's waning from about, I don't mind 15% or less. So when the moon's waning, or it is nearly the new moon, just find the clearest night you can. Plan for 2 or 3 nights, and that way you'll probably get a nice clear night as well. And then of course the last consideration when it comes to conditions is light pollution. So if you're in a big city, you're going to have to travel a little bit to get yourself out of light pollution. But there is plenty of apps that do light pollution prediction. And even your photographer's Empress will do that, or just Google light pollution and you'll see a light pollution map will come up on Google that you can use. Put in an area and it'll show you what the light pollution looks like. And you really want no light pollution if you can help it, but a little bit won't hurt. Just you don't want the light pollution of the city, or you just won't get a good shot. There'll be too much light around for a long exposure and it'll be very difficult for you to capture the Milky Way. All right, let's talk settings. I know everybody wants to know how you set your camera up. Now that you've thought about the equipment you need and the conditions, of course, settings in your camera is super important. The first thing you need to know is that you're going to be in manual mode and you need to really know your way around your camera. There's some things that you're going to need to be changing in the dark. ISO is one of them. Shutter speed is going to be the other. So really get comfortable with where to make those 2 adjustments. You're probably also going to need to be able to play back your images and zoom in to be able to check the composition or how sharp those images are. So you want to be able to be really comfortable with that. So, sit and practice, rehearse on the lounge as you're watching telly, whatever it is, get used to where all the buttons are so you know how to adjust all of those things. Now, when it comes to your focus, you want to be in manual focus. We're going to talk a little bit about how to do focusing, and I'm going to show you in this next clip very shortly how I go about focusing in the dark using live view, but I use my live view to do that. ISO is going to be somewhere between 1250 and 3200 is typically what I shoot. Depending on the lens that you're using, you might have to change. Now my aperture is at f2.8, okay, which is the widest this lens will go to, so you do the same with your lens. If your lens doesn't go down to f2.8, you're just going to have to increase your ISO to be able to keep your shutter speed within allowable limits. Now when I say allowable limits, you might be thinking, well, why don't you just do a longer exposure? Well, you can put it into bulb and you do 1 minute, 2, 3, whatever you like, but that is going to create what's called star trails. And my desire is to have nice sharp stars, and to do this there's a little rule we call the 500 rule, and what you do is you take 500 and divide it by your focal length, and that is the maximum allowable seconds that you want to keep your shutter open. Otherwise you're going to start introducing blur or motion blur because the stars are actually moving as you're shooting. So for example, 500 divided by 14 is around about 35 seconds, divided by 24 mil is something like 20 something seconds. So just do the maths for yourself and you'll quickly work out where you need to be. And of course, if you go from 30 seconds down to 20 seconds, you're going to have to increase your ISO to get the same exposure. And this is why it's so important that you know how to change everything in here. Shoot RAW if you can. I always shoot RAW, but if you are shooting JPEG, make sure you turn your long exposure noise reduction off. Now the reason for that is because you're going to do a 30-second exposure. It is then going to take another 30 seconds for the noise reduction to happen. In a lot of these cameras, that's what it takes. It's just going to chew up battery and it's going to be annoying and frustrating, so turn that off. White balance, if you're shooting raw, doesn't matter. Your camera's going to struggle with the white balance. So, I typically just put mine into auto, and I fix it up later when I do the post-processing. Close the viewfinder if you have a DSLR on the optical viewfinder. So on the back here, there's a little switch where I can open and close a little shutter across the viewfinder. Just make sure you close that. That way, if you are behind the camera and your light's reflecting off of you, or you've got your headlamp on, even if you're not facing that way, you might get, introduce some light. So just close that off. That way, you've got no way of light leaking in through the back of the camera, which is why that's there, by the way, so you can do that. And that means that you're going to have to use live view, which I love using anyway. And in this next clip, you're going to see how I use live view, and how I set my composition, how I set my focus, and how I take my photos. As you can imagine, it's really dark, and so it makes it difficult to see things. So there's a few things that I do to help myself. First of all is I use live view. So I'll just show you what's going on here on the back of the camera. And so you can see that I've got my virtual horizon up. I use that to sort of get my idea of what it is I'm going to shoot. And to get my composition right, the easiest thing to do is just go into your settings, do a 30-second exposure, bring your ISO up really high, like maybe 6,400, and take a shot. Now it's going to be overexposed when this one is done, but what you'll end up with is you'll end up with a bright enough picture that'll give you an idea of where everything is laying on the land and how your composition is set. So once that's done, I'll show you. That's my first trick, is so really high ISO, take a 30-second exposure, and that puts enough light onto everything that you'll be able to see your composition. Don't worry about checking whether focus is right or anything like that at this point in time. All you want to do is get your composition right first. So there we go, it's just done it. Let's have a look. So I'll press the play button. Now you can see straight away that it's actually struggling to show you that, but you can see straight away where the composition is. That's the rocks. The sky is what's really, really bright. So by shooting at that high ISO has given me that opportunity to be able to get my composition right and make sure I'm comfortable with that. Another trick, which is quite good, is if you've got a torch, which I've got a headlamp on, you can actually light up the rocks in front, and you can sort of, I don't know if you can see that on here. See my light there? So you can sort of just light it up. And this is where live view is really helpful on these modern day cameras, is you can use your live view and get yourself really well set up. So they're the two tricks for getting your composition right. Now I'm going to put my ISO back down to about 1600. I'm at 30 seconds. I don't know how well you can see that, me too. Yeah, I'm at 30 seconds, f2.8, and ISO 1600. I've got my virtual horizon on at the moment. Don't need to have that on, but you won't see anything else if I take that off. But this is the next trick that I do, is I use live view for my focusing, and what I do is I zoom right in tight. I then try and find a star. I don't know how well you can see that, but because it's not easy, or a couple of stars, and then I just move the focus ring around. So you can see those two dots there, they're stars. And so I just move the focus ring around until those stars are nice and in focus. And that's how I focus. Once you've got that set, then you can zoom back out and you can take your shot. So I'm going to have to turn this light off to take this next shot, because we want to, actually I'll face it this way and I'll talk to you as I'm doing it. So I'm doing a 30-second shot at f2.8 ISO 1600. We've set the composition, we've set the focus. Now we've just got to wait for the shot and hope it all works out. Tell you what, can't see a thing with this light in my face, and I can see that this light is creating light pollution over here. Anyway, it gives you a good idea of how I do it. Now I'll just show you one more trick which I learnt, which works really good for making sure that you have cracked your focus and that you're happy with your composition, and that is to use one of these. Now this is a Hoodman loop, and what I do is I press play to view my image, and you can sort of maybe get a feel for that there. I don't know how well that's going to work. Camera's struggling a little bit, but then I can put my Hoodman loop over, and then you can sort of have a look through the loop, and that'll sort of tell you, you know, whether or not you're in focus. So this is a Hoodman loop. Usually you use it in the daylight to stop the glare from making it difficult to see the screen, but of a night time, I use it sometimes to make sure I've got my focus. So there you go. So I'm going to take a few more shots, and hopefully you enjoyed this sort of on location part of this Astro shoot. And if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I'll also, like I said, when I get back home, I'll do some other tips and hints for you on how to know what nights to go out and shoot, which way to point the camera, etc. But I won't do that now because it's dark, it's cold, and I just want to get on with shooting the Milky Way. Well, there you have it. Hopefully you found that helpful. If you did, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, and down below in the comments, let me know, how you're going with your astrophotography. It is Astro season here on the east coast of Australia. We've got a couple more months of shooting the Milky Way throughout the night until it gets too late. I don't like being out there at 3 in the morning, but some crazy photographers are. So take care, get out there and take some photos.